Japan measures earthquakes on a scale that stops at 7. There is no level 8. No matter how violent the ground moves, the instruments physically cannot report anything worse. This afternoon, 2 towns south of Kumamoto City maxed that scale out. People are trapped right now. A shopping mall has partially collapsed, with casualties feared. More than 150,000 people are out of their homes tonight, and instructions to evacuate reportedly cover as many as 300,000 residents. But here's the number that should worry you most: 28. Because the last time this exact fault system produced a quake like this, the bigger earthquake came 28 hours later. So here's what actually happened this afternoon, why the numbers coming out of Japan right now are almost unprecedented, and why officials are telling an entire prefecture that the next 7 days may be the real danger, not today. Stay with me, because the history behind this fault is the part almost nobody is explaining correctly right now. At 4:27 in the afternoon, local time, a powerful earthquake tore through Kumamoto Prefecture, on the Japanese island of Kyushu. For the people closest to the fault, there was almost no meaningful warning. At that distance, the alert and the ground motion arrived together. Within seconds, 2 entire communities were experiencing something only a handful of people in recorded history have ever felt directly beneath their feet. The Japan Meteorological Agency confirmed maximum seismic intensity 7 in the city of Yukai and the town of Hikawa. That single number is the most important fact in this entire story, and it deserves a real explanation before we go any further, because everything else that happened today only makes sense once you understand what intensity 7 actually means. Japan's Shindo intensity scale runs from 0 to 7 across 10 graded steps, with levels 5 and 6 each split into upper and lower tiers. It's measured directly by instruments at hundreds of ground stations, not estimated, not modeled from a distance. Japan builds its warning systems, its building codes, and its public alerts around intensity rather than magnitude, for one simple reason. Intensity is what actually hits a person standing on the ground. Magnitude just tells you the total energy of the whole event. And the very top of that scale, the level with nothing above it, is what these 2 towns experienced this afternoon. Intensity 7 has only ever been recorded 8 times in Japan's entire instrumented history. Kobe in 1995. Niigata in 2004. The Tohoku megaquake in 2011. Kumamoto, twice in 2016. Hokkaido in 2018. The Noto Peninsula in 2024. And now, today. 3 of those 8 readings now belong to this one prefecture alone. At intensity 7, people cannot stay on their feet. Furniture doesn't slide across a room, it launches. Reinforced concrete can come down, and unreinforced buildings can fail outright. This is happening in the most earthquake-prepared nation on the planet, which tells you exactly how extreme this afternoon's shaking really was. Part of the answer is depth. The rupture occurred roughly 10 kilometers underground, shallower than a passenger jet's cruising altitude. That energy had almost no distance to lose strength before slamming into homes, schools, roads, and rail lines. And because this earthquake struck inland, not offshore, it hit directly beneath one of the more densely populated corridors of Kyushu, just south of Kumamoto City. 2 agencies published 2 different magnitude numbers. The U.S. Geological Survey placed it near magnitude 6.8. Japan's own agency, sitting directly on top of the rupture with the densest seismic network on Earth, says 7.1. That gap represents roughly double the released energy. A real difference, but it matters less than it sounds, because the shaking itself was already measured directly, not estimated. Those instruments in Yukai and Hikawa recorded exactly what happened. A shallow rupture directly under a populated area delivers its energy essentially point-blank. That's how a 7.1 can produce the maximum reading on the intensity scale, while even larger offshore quakes sometimes don't come close. The most serious single incident of this earthquake is unfolding right now at a shopping mall, where an explosion followed the initial shaking and part of the second floor came down, trapping a large number of people inside. Police have said, in their own words, that they expect a significant number of fatalities from that incident. Witnesses reported white smoke rising from the building. Customers and employees were being evacuated when the explosion occurred, and the exact cause is still unclear, though officials are looking closely at a possible gas-related source. No confirmed death toll exists yet, and nobody responsible should be inventing one. But the language police are using tonight tells you clearly that they are not expecting good news. Consider the timing. Late afternoon on a weekday is close to peak traffic for a shopping mall. School just out, errands running, food courts full. The combination of blast damage and structural collapse makes this one of the most difficult rescue environments possible. This mall is almost certainly where tonight's final death toll gets decided. The broader damage picture is filling in by the hour, and none of it is small. At least a dozen buildings have collapsed, including several separate cases of people trapped inside homes, most concentrated in the city of Yatsushiro. A large bridge has come down. Emergency lines were overwhelmed within the first hour, with multiple building fires burning and people trapped in more than one location. Kumamoto City is reporting its own fires, with people trapped there as well. In Hikawa, the same town that recorded maximum intensity, at least 50 people have been injured and taken to hospitals, including several from a local care home. More than 50 additional people are hospitalized in Kumamoto City, at least one of them unconscious. That puts the confirmed injury count past 100 already, with rescue calls still coming in from people pinned under collapsed furniture and fallen structures. The scale of Japan's response tells you exactly how seriously officials are treating the days ahead. More than 150,000 people have evacuated so far, with instructions covering as many as 300,000 residents. Roughly 50,000 households in Kumamoto have lost electricity. Every rail line in the region has been suspended, including the bullet train. The regional airport has closed its runway. Japan's defense minister ordered coordinated self-defense force operations, and the prime minister stood up an emergency government task force within the hour, saying lives are the top priority. None of this is overcaution. It's procedure with a body count behind it. High-speed rail can't run again until every kilometer of track, every viaduct, and every tunnel has been physically inspected, because a bullet train meeting a displaced rail joint at nearly 300 kilometers an hour becomes its own mass casualty event. There's a quieter danger too. In 2016, a large share of Kumamoto's deaths weren't people crushed in the shaking. They were disaster-related deaths that came afterward, during weeks of evacuation from stress, disrupted medical care, and people sleeping in their cars. Within roughly 2 minutes of the rupture, Japan issued a tsunami advisory for nearby coastlines, warning of waves up to 1 meter, small sounding, but still strong enough to sweep an adult off their feet. In the end, no significant waves were recorded, and the advisory was lifted. That outcome fits the physics. This was a sideways, inland-style rupture, not the kind of vertical seafloor movement that generates large tsunamis. 2 nuclear plants sit in the wider region. Early checks at both show no abnormalities, the most reassuring number of the entire night, and one that will be rechecked after every significant aftershock. Kumamoto also sits at the center of Japan's semiconductor industry. The world's largest chip maker evacuated workers from its local plant as a precaution, and a major imaging sensor manufacturer operates in the same corridor. In 2016, a similar quake disrupted global camera sensor supply chains for months. No damage has been confirmed yet, but chip fabs are extraordinarily sensitive to vibration. Here's the part that has every official in Kumamoto on edge tonight. 10 years ago, in April 2016, this same region was hit by a magnitude 6.5 earthquake that also reached maximum intensity 7. Seismologists treated it as the main shock. Residents were told the worst had passed, and people who had evacuated began returning to their damaged homes. 28 hours later, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake ruptured the connected fault, larger than the first, also registering intensity 7. The earthquake everyone had called the main shock was reclassified afterward as only a foreshock. Roughly 276 people died across that sequence, many inside buildings that had cracked but held after the first quake, only to collapse in the second, before anyone could shore them up. That disaster forced Japan's meteorological agency to rewrite its public guidance entirely. It stopped reassuring people that aftershocks would only get smaller, because Kumamoto had just proven that assumption could kill. The current standard, born directly from this prefecture's own history, is that for roughly a week after a large inland earthquake, another quake of comparable size remains possible. That is precisely what Japan's Prime Minister told the country today. The aftershock sequence is already running. A magnitude 4.5 hit about 2 minutes after the main shock, with further aftershocks following through the afternoon, and a separate intensity 5 event recorded nearby shortly after 5 p.m. Statistically, the largest aftershock in a sequence like this tends to land a little over 1 full magnitude point below the main shock, putting the expected ceiling somewhere around magnitude 6. That's not a forecast, and after what happened in 2016, nobody in Japan treats it as a guarantee either. What matters most now is the shape of the aftershock map. If epicenters stay tightly clustered, that's a sequence behaving normally, winding down day by day. If they start stretching along the fault line, that signals stress migrating into the next segment, part of what preceded the second, larger quake in 2016. A few false claims are already spreading tonight. This is not the long-feared Nankai Trough megaquake. Some circulating castle damage footage is actually from 2016, and no volcanic activity has been linked to today's event. Kumamoto learned, at a devastating cost, that the label main shock only ever gets assigned in hindsight. The next few days will decide which version of this story we're living through. Stay with verified updates, not rumors.